All right, good morning. How's everyone doing?
We're
Pretty
doing
good.
doing good.
Okay. Let's see. Who do we have in the room?
Me. Hi.
Who's me?
Mariah.
Right. I can see, I've got a camera on. I see two empty chairs under the clock. That's all I can see. So I'm flying blind. So I've got Mariah and Logan.
Yep.
And
Anybody else?
Francine and Catherine and Josh.
Francine, Josh. Okay, let's see. Mariah, Logan, Francine, Josh, and who else?
Catherine.
Catherine. Right. Okay, let's get started. Oh, okay. Who'd like to open prayer?
I will.
Okay.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for bringing us here together today. Thank you that we get a chance to learn more about music and how we use that to glorify you. God, just thank you for friends, and thank you for fellowship, and thank you for the nice weather we're having today, and bless this time. Amen.
Amen. Good. All right. Again, the purpose of this class is to help you hone in on your philosophy of music and worship, and to pick up some skills in terms of leadership, because you will all be in some type of leadership capacity in your jobs. So whether you're a worship pastor or a music teacher or a performer, you will be in a position where you're going to need to direct the activity of other people. And so it's not just knowing how to order people around, but it's also how to deal with people in fair and just manner. You don't want to be a pushover so that somebody can ride roughshod over you or your ministry. And yet at the same time, you need to serve people as Christ served the church, and a servant with a servant attitude. So somehow we have to balance humility along with the power and authority and responsibility that comes with being in a leadership position. So we're touching on different things as we go through each class. Continue to read the Rory Heart of an Artist book. Right now, and I think I signed through chapter 4 of last week. Continue to hover there. Maybe even reread chapters 1 through 4. We will start talking about it at some point. Let's see. I got your essays for the last time. Okay, your essay. You do have an essay due on Saturday midnight. Your interview is due tonight at midnight, right? And again, no late submissions, so be sure you get that done and get it in. Heart of an Artist through chapter 4. 916, Collaborative Music Selection Project. So you should be working, by now you should be in a group. If you, don't wait until the last moment to tell me you couldn't find a group. Okay, that's your responsibility. That's part of, I hope, putting you in a situation where you have to take initiative. And matter of fact, all of these assignments are, I hope you're taking initiative and moving them through and not waiting until the last minute. Because when you are in ministry, you may be the only person that's pushing the ministry forward. And so I'm leaving it up to you to make the contacts, get the work done. I think almost just about every reasonable person in the class, if you approach them, if they aren't already involved in a group, is going to say, sure, I'll do something with you. So the 916 Collaborative Music Selection Project, and then of course 923 is a collaborative administration project. Now, the collaborative music selection project, what it says is work in a small group for this project and select music for an ensemble for 6 months of operation. I'm not giving you a lot of specifics on this. If you decide that you want to do something other than music for an ensemble for 6 months of operation, and it's something that's comparable, the purpose of this assignment is not to figure out 6 months of music. The purpose of this assignment is to work collaboratively on a project and come and deal with the problem before you and come up with a solution. So if you want to redesign this this project, I'm open to that, but it is due in 2 weeks. So like I say, you should already be in a group. Matter of fact, I might have you, let's do this, along with on Saturday when you hand in your essay, let me know who you're working with in your group also. So say, so answer the essay and say, here are the people in my group, okay? And then let me know if you want to look at an alternative to the ensemble, 6 months of operation of an ensemble. So I think the ensemble thing, that should be pretty easy for any of you. So we'll, and in some cases, it's something that you can actually use your first year on the job when you're working at as a worship pastor or a music educator or in one of those types of things. If you're a CCM, you could put together 6 months of concert dates with your band or something like that. So any questions about that? So tonight, your interview's due. 2 weeks from now, your collaborative music selection project is due. 3 weeks from now, your collaborative administration project is due. And 4 weeks from now is your philosophy of music and research, music and worship paper. And then 5 weeks from now is your research project and oral report. So that's what's coming up. And if there are no questions, let's get started. No questions? Great.
What does an oral presentation of the collaborative music assignments look like, especially if you're working with somebody online?
Right. Collaborative, the collaborative assignments, it's going to be the same as your interview. Let's see, when was the interview? Oh, the interview was during class today, wasn't it?
At midnight.
Do it midnight.
Let's do it midnight.
Oh, was it midnight?
Mhm.
Good. Let's make it midnight. It was at midnight?
I think we're supposed to give like a summary, like verbally, of what the interview was like in
Still
class,
says,
but on Canvas it's due tonight.
Right. Okay, so all of these oral reports are going to work the same way. I'm going to ask you for insights. So, your interview, for instance, I'm going to ask you, what did you learn from the process? Anything surprise you? Was everything that was told you was what you were expected? I'm going to ask you questions and you're going to tell me what happened. Now, if you're online and you're watching in real time, if you want to unmute your mic, you can do that. You can tell me. If you aren't, if you're watching this after the fact, I'm not going to hold you to the oral part of the presentation. Now, for a research project, that somehow you're going to have to give an oral report. And if everybody in your group for the research project, the last assignment, if everyone in your group is online and watching at a time other than when we're doing this live, then you're going to need, one of you is going to need to sit down in front of your phone, record the report, send it to me, and then I'll distribute it. Okay. So what I'll do is send me the phone file, and then I'll upload it to Microsoft OneDrive or whatever they call that. What do they call that? OneDrive. And then I'll share it from there. So So let's see. Okay, other questions? Okay, so all the interviews are due tonight at midnight, right? Okay. Let's see. Well, we have that. While we're on that, have you who have you interviewed, and any insights so far?
So, to be completely honest, I'm only halfway done with my interview putting on my paper. I recorded it, so I don't have the entire thing, but so far from what I I remember talking to him. I talked to Pastor Josiah from Fellowship Greenwood.
Yeah.
And he gave me some really good insight about his philosophy of music. You know, when it comes to like music in general and even worship music, the goal of the worship leader is to find songs that, no matter where they come from, like they're always biblically sound, and they connect to people. For what they're doing with music at Fellowship, basically the same thing. Whether they're singing like new songs, like from Hillsong, or if they're like old hymns, they need to make sure that they hit on all cylinders, whether it's biblically sound, and it connects to like as many people as possible.
Okay. All right. Okay, good. Anybody else have anything to share?
I interviewed Miss Lisa, and her philosophy of music is essentially an extension of communication. And obviously her musical background and her family greatly influenced that and the relationship with Christ. And then the music organization that she's working for right now is Strong Tree. And she's been able to travel overseas. So she had something to share about that. And right now, currently, she is hosting a lot of house concerts where she lives, but she went into detail about that in the interview. Challenges she's faced included not really having a strong background in music theory, but overcoming that and finding loopholes. She also expressed how difficult it can be, but also rewarding to have a family and also pursue a career in CCM. So I thought that was really interesting. And she emphasized how important it is when you're making a hard decision to really weigh your options. And once you sign something, you're kind of stuck with it. So making sure that your lawyers are on the same note as you are. And advice, she'd also gone over what I just said. One of the things that she really tried to emphasize is how important it is to play and to journal as much as you possibly can so that you can find, in her words, the gems just beneath the surface. And she had lots of other things to share, but those are just some of the highlights, I guess.
Good. Okay. Good. Anything else? Well, go ahead.
I talked to a local pastor / worship pastor from back home. I don't attend his church, but I just reached out to him for the reason that I think I possibly might be moving back in that area to be a worship pastor. Mm-hmm. And there was two things that caught my attention when we talked. The first one was he did not want to call it a stage. He wanted to call it a platform. And the reason he said that is because he tries to get across to his worship team that it's a hard issue. This is not about us. We're leading the congregation to worship Christ. And then the second thing, a question I asked him that I was kind of shocked on was, do you feel comfortable reaching out to other pastors in the community? And he said, absolutely not. And the reason is because there are very few Bible-believing churches in the area. And if they're not going to align with him doctrinally, then he is not going to talk with them.
Yeah. It doesn't mean you can't say hi at the grocery store.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. But it's, yeah, ecumenicalism is not our friend.
Right.
So, okay, very good. This isn't worship literature or worship leading, but there is a definite shift occurring in the churches that we would normally minister to, where the music's being driven by emotion, and it's being driven by emotion over than actual content. And it's all right to have worship where there's an emotional response to it, but when the goal is the development of experiential worship, where the goal is to move the worshiper emotionally, that's the goal, then you're in trouble, because you can do that without solid doctrine. And so it concerns me that I see it happen. It doesn't surprise me that I see it in the charismatic church, and some of the other contemporary styles of churches that are contemporary style of worship. It does concern me that it's seeping into churches that would have historically been very strong on doctrine and very strong on proper worship. So we're at the front line of that. So whatever your major is, whatever your concentration is for your degree, you're going to probably be involved in worship at the churches that you're attending, because you're all musicians. So I would just caution you, the shift has happened very quickly, very short period of time. So, and you may be listening to what I'm saying thinking, what's he talking about? He's crazy. I don't want to go to some dry old fogey church. And I'm not saying that's the issue. Yeah, enough of that. We can talk, if you want to talk more about that, we can, but let's get on with this other stuff. All right, questions. Let's see, I read week 1 and week 2. Let's start with week 1. Define music. Now, a few of you have had me in previous classes and you remember what I said, which is really encouraging to me if I say something and you actually remember it from a previous class from a year or two ago. But I received lots of input on what is music, and oftentimes, and I picked it up from this time too. We're going to digest this down to the very core, the very kernel of what music is. Is noise music?
No.
No, it's noise. Okay. So these aren't trick questions, by the way. So a jet flying overhead, or someone coughing, or a dog barking, that's not music, that's noise. Okay. If I take my phone, which actually I'm using to record this, if I take my phone and I turn on my pitch pipe app and I play A440, is that music?
No.
No, it's a tone, it's a sound, but it's not music. It's a sound as opposed to perhaps noise. Noise would be a jet. A noise would be somebody coughing. Sound would be something like, or a tone would be a sound, okay? So a sound is going to have some pitch and some kind of characteristic that we can describe. Is silence music?
No.
It can be. I'm sorry, John Cage's.
Yes.
433.
I forgot about that, yeah.
4 minutes, 33 seconds. John Cage, 4 minutes, 33 seconds.
Yeah.
Nobody says it's a part of music. I agree with that. Silence is not music, but silence is a part of music. John Cage. Let's talk about John Cage a little bit. What exactly is 4 minutes and 33 seconds about?
It's basically.
A lot of people reference that work and they don't understand what John Cage was actually doing with that.
Well, it's different every time because it intensifies with the reaction of the audience. So there's no way it's going to be the same every time he performs it or whoever performs the piece or sits at the piano or whatever. So it's different every time, and the art of it is in the audience and their reaction and what goes on around that, like in that time. So it's different every time, and it's very interesting to experience.
That's actually, you are exactly right. John Cage didn't write a piece about no sound. John Cage wrote a piece about ambient sound. He said, I'm going to order ambient sound. There are noises that occur, and the noises occur, in this case, occur in time. And he said, he even talks about it when you read some of his writings. He said, it's really interesting to hear what happens. And then he said, by the time you get to the third movement, it gets really interesting as some people decide to get up and walk out of the theater. He said, all this stuff is happening. And he goes, it's a piece that moves people to action, or at least has an effect on them. And so the fact that it has an effect doesn't make it music. The fact that they get up and walk out doesn't make it music. Music doesn't have to elicit a response. But it almost always does. It doesn't have to be pleasing, but it usually is. But some music isn't. Music doesn't have to be entertaining. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't need to be beautiful. It can be very ugly. You don't have to like it for it to be music. What are the basics of music? Two things.
Rhythm.
Not even rhythm. Rhythm is if you're looking at chant, if you're looking at plain chant or Gregorian chant, you would say, well, that's music, but there's no rhythm in that. Chanting is a free rhythm, okay? So it would be hard pressed to say that there's a rhythm to that. There's certainly a flow. But there's another word that I'm looking for that is bigger than rhythm. It has to do with sound occurring.
Melody.
Pardon?
Melody.
No, it doesn't have to have a melody. It can have a melody, but it doesn't have to have a melody.
Just sound waves.
It does have to have sound. That's one of them. So there's two things that you need for music. You need sound.
Movement.
Format.
Movement is a sound movement. Let's call it that. Order. That's the second thing. You have to have sound and you have to have order. There has to be some way that you're ordering that sound. So here is a definition for music. I've been doing this a long, long time. That doesn't make me smarter than you. So I probably am smarter than you, but that doesn't mean anything. I could still be wrong. We'll talk about that here in about a half hour. But I have looked at music upside down and right side up. I've read, I've studied, I've talked to other musicians, and this is where we come to some kind of conclusion. And as you get farther on in your music making, you will realize how really profound, and I didn't come up with this, this is somebody else's idea, how really profound this definition for music is. Music is the ordering of sound in time. Music is the ordering of sound in time. That way it strips away harmony, it strips away Western music. That applies to Western music, Eastern music, African music. It applies to anything, any culture, anything that has been described as music in the past by anybody. That covers it. The ordering of sound and time. Now it's interesting because we're temporal creatures. God made us. God is outside of time. He doesn't have to respond to time. God is timeless. He knows everything. And how do you know everything? Well, the first thing you need to do is be outside of time and not be temporal. Otherwise, there are things coming that you don't know. But since God knows everything, he obviously has to be operating outside of time. But we do operate in time. And because we operate in time, it makes things, all sorts of things possible. The reason a 1-4-5-1 chord progression works is because of time. 5 to 1 as a cadence only works if you can hear 5 first and then a one chord follows it. Chord progressions and harmonies only work if they are laid out in time. If you're reading a book, if you're, we're beyond Harry Potter at this point, but if you were homeschooled and your parents still allowed you to read Harry Potter, the exciting thing about Harry Potter is that the book sets up some conflict or something that has to be solved, and then that thing is solved over the course of the book. But it's the fact that you don't know everything that's going on, just like a movie. You don't know everything that's going on at the beginning, and it's the ending that ties it all together. That has to happen in time. If I tell you a joke, how are a grape and an elephant the same? That joke is only funny or meaningful, if it's funny at all, because of time. If you already know the answer, it can't work as a joke. So you have to have, for a joke to work, it has to happen in time. So how are a grape and an elephant the same? They're both purple except for the elephant. Okay, so the punchline only works as a punchline if it's delayed from the original joke. And then still it may not work. Music works the same way. Music is the ordering of sound in time. And that's what John Cage does in his 3 movements of 4 minutes and 33 seconds. It is an incredible thing to go to a live performance of that piece, and you can make a whole room of maybe 1,500 people sit silently or try to sit silently for 5 minutes with trying not to make any noise. That's incredible. Imagine how hard that is. Imagine if I were doing a chapel service and I said, what I'd like to do right now is start, and for the next 5 minutes, we're just going to sit here and not make any noise. Okay? At some point, somebody would start to laugh, somebody would make somebody else laugh, but that doesn't happen in performances of this piece. Certainly not now. When it first was performed, people were shocked because it was built up as this big debut piece, and so they didn't know what to expect. But they did know John Cage was an avant-garde composer. Okay, so any questions, comments? Okay, so the ordering of sound in time. Let's continue. We've got a lot of cool stuff to cover today. Define worship. Here are your comments. Some of you said, no, most of you said worship is more than singing. So a number of you pulled out 1 Corinthians 10:31. that we do all these things for the glory of God. Whatever it is you're doing, do for the glory of God. There were specific activities tied to it. Some of you said, a couple of you said, you need to do, worship is prayer, scripture reading, tithing, fellowship, ministry, and of course, music. Let's see, one of you talked about the Greek shows 3 main words used for the English term of worship in the Bible, translated to English. The words in the Bible translated to English for worship are kneeling, lying prostrate, to serve and to revere. Okay, so those are kinds of very demonstrative, and we're going to talk about that more in this class, not today, but in a couple of weeks we'll be talking about words for praise and worship and what the original words were, what they actually mean. Worship is a communication from human beings to God. Worship is a glorification of God. Somebody actually said, one of your papers mentioned that worship does not only apply to God. We as humans can worship lots of different things. Most of them are inappropriate. God's a jealous God, and our worship and devotion should be reserved for Him. I'm going to give you a nice, succinct definition of we were created to worship, and this is a nice, succinct definition, like my definition on music. Now, this is bigger than worship. It's our purpose. It's why we're here. Why are we here on earth?
Worship. Right. Yeah.
Because God put us here. He created us.
Okay. The Westminster Shorter Catechism. Westminster Shorter Catechism says our chief end, our chief purpose, the reason we're here is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. Glorify God and enjoy Him forever. That's what we are. That's who we are. That's why we're here. Isn't that sweet? Okay. So sometimes the shortest phrases can be the most profound. I've got this. I'm logged into my wife's Facebook Messenger account, because I had to look something up for her, and I keep getting these posts. I think it's Nobi, and it's not Nobi. That was Julie talking about something completely different. So, okay. So, questions, comments?
For the paper or the essay, because you mentioned, what is worship is a very broad question, because what is worship for humans, or what is worship for a believer, or all that. And so I put a very broad definition. I was just like, it's glorification or an act of surrender to a person or a thing. It doesn't have to be God in terms of we idolize and we worship things that are not God. We shouldn't, but that's what we do because we are sinners, and that's what the rest of the world does. And so that's why I put a very broad definition, because
I thought that was a good point too. That's why I included it. You were actually the person who mentioned it.
I guess we use that word as Christians, and we kind of sort of understand, but that word does not only apply to Christians or believers. It applies to everyone. We all, because like you said, we were all born with a desire to worship something or someone, and we were created.
What kinds of things do you see Christians? What kinds of things do you see Christians worshiping? That would be, truly worshiping outside of God.
Themselves.
Okay.
Tradition.
Well, nationalism.
National politics. Boy, that's huge, isn't it? The way politics, the way politics and Christianity are stirred together in this country, the politics have, they're almost inseparable. That's not, I don't think you can at all make that out to be God's plan. I have strong political feelings, but they have, other than the fact that they're influenced by my Christian beliefs, my politics are not my belief, are not my Christianity. And so I love the United States. I think it's a great place to live, but it's not my home. Heaven is my home. I am simply a visitor here. And so I'm not saying that it's wrong for Christians to get involved in politics. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that don't let politics become your religion. And I have strong political opinions, but don't let it become your religion. Okay. And it's not like that in not every country has the kind of politically charged Christianity that we have here, or politically charged everything that we have here. It's not just Christianity. Politics, if there were a state religion in the United States, I would say it's politics. Okay. Other things that we worship?
I would say a very subtle one is our self-image. How we are portrayed to other people is very important to us, and sometimes that can override how we're being, where we're placing our identity in Christ. I think sometimes it can get lost in trying to find our identity in other people being with us.
Yeah, and I think most of you in the room have heard me say, and online have heard me say that we live in the most narcissistic generation in the history of the world. And social media, there's some good to social media and there's some bad to social media. One of the bad things about social media is that it promotes self. It promotes the idea that what I'm doing is so important that I need to post it and let other people know that I went to the grocery store this afternoon. I mean, it's hard to even, because I really don't buy into the social media stuff, and it's hard to kind of get your head around how really crazy people have become. I see these sites, and they're fun. They're fun to watch, YouTube videos. Somebody traveling around the world, luxury hotels, and maybe they have a sailboat, or maybe they have an RV and they're going around the country. They're just programs. They're like reality programs. And what you're seeing on YouTube is completely filtered and edited, just like anything on TV. But they give the idea that somehow their lives are great and your life is awful. And so what you do is you go back onto social media. I'm not saying all you do this, but then it compels us to go back onto social media and try to post something to make me look relevant, so that I can say my life matters too, my life is cool too, I'm living this great dream life too, where the truth is that we're all struggling to make it through this life, and if you're not living for Christ, all this stuff is for naught anyway. So the idea of self and worshiping self. Okay. So anything else anybody want to add to that?
I mean, worship or is like worshiping like materials, like materialistic things. I don't like alcohol or drugs, or I don't know, or something like that.
So alcohol and drugs are a way to escape the pain of being a human being, and you can, if you get hooked on that stuff, you can worship it. I mean, you'd be willing to do anything for it. To normal people, there are things that people do that are hooked on drugs. there are things people are willing to do to get a drug fix that any right-minded person would never do if they weren't hooked on it. So, let's see, what was your first comment, Josh?
I try to work my way into like the addiction stuff, like drugs and alcohol. Or
Yeah, what did you say before that?
materialistic items.
Here's something that's interesting. I think you guys live in the most narcissistic generation of all time. To give you equal opportunity, my generation is the most materialistic generation of all time. So if you look at baby boomers, and I mentioned last week, I think, Generation Jones, baby boomers, the Generation Jones, which are the generation I grew up in. It's the idea of keeping up or surpassing the Joneses, or I want to make sure I have more toys than the guy I live next to. Status is important. Material wealth is important. That's an idol, and that's worship. And I don't see that nearly as much in your generation as I do in my generation. And that's why my generation is built on competition. But the buzzword is competition, and it goes along with the churches. A baby boomer church is a church driven by competition, as opposed to a Gen Xer church that is generally driven by cooperation. Because the Gen Xers grew up in households where the parents were baby boomers, and they were put off by the materialism and said, I'm not going to fall for the materialism of my parents. And so that's why you see a Gen X church much more interested in collaboration and getting along. So it seems each generation has its own foibles and problems. So, but yours is definitely narcissism because of social media. So, but you've just replaced. That's what's replaced materialism. Materialism is still there. Narcissism has always been there. Just seems like different generations have different focuses on these things. Okay, other comments?
I was thinking tradition, like we tend to worship the Bible itself as an item rather than actually understanding the word, or praising the Lord's Prayer, like worshiping it rather than actually understanding where it's coming from. So I think tradition is a big thing we worship.
Or holding to a particular translation of the Bible.
Oh yeah.
Or women should be wearing dresses and hats to church.
Yeah.
Some practice. Yeah, absolutely. That becomes more important than the actual truth of the gospel. So, and we see it, and it's very evident in some churches. So, okay, let's keep going. Question from last week: what are the 10 largest churches in the U.S. in your reaction to that? I'm going to share some of your comments, and you might have some more things to add here. Excellent comments as you were reading through it. The one thing I didn't really, there was one of you actually that brought this up. Everybody else seemed to miss it, but I'm going to start with this. The one thing missing from your comments is that most of these churches are non-denominational. Now, it's interesting, like I say, one of you said, yeah, these churches are either non-denominational or Southern Baptist, right? So I would say that the non-denominationalism of churches is really a recent phenomenon. 15 or 20 years ago, the list would have been denominationally oriented. It would have said Catholic, it would have said, or if we're doing Protestant churches, it would have said Lutheran, or it would have said Southern Baptist, or it would have said American Baptist. Not too long ago, denomination was everything. Now it's nothing. Actually, churches are going out of their way to hide their denominations. One of you pointed out one of the Southern Baptist churches on the list is moving away from using Southern Baptist as an identifier for the church. They don't want to be, in the old days, if you could get the First Baptist gig for your town, to be the First Baptist church in your town, that was instant audience for your messages. Now people are moving away from that. They're dropping the names of the denominations out of the church. Okay, but what's also interesting is that when you look at all these churches, they all pretty much say they have the same core beliefs. But you and I know that these churches functionally are in very different universes. So let's look at some of this. Someone said that they all focus on love and community. That's very different than churches in the past. If you're going to focus on love and community, then you're not going to want to be denominational, because denomination automatically sets you apart from other churches. But when you're non-denominational, it says we're all encompassing, we want everybody, we're universal. Some of you shared a few controversies involving these churches. Some churches had issues with focusing on money, with focusing on status. That would be baby boomer type churches where they're being driven to actually be, we want to be the biggest church in the United States, so everything we're gonna do is focus on growth. Several of you commented on the use of technology, that there was a ton of technology. Churches, these biggest churches have a great command of technology, and they're also very focused on youth. And so between the technology and the youth focus, they are very similar. Not all of them. There was one or two notable exceptions, but basically it's technology. The social media presence, websites, the videos. Someone said that they're all really incredible quality, top-notch quality. Some of these churches look like they have a Hollywood producer producing their church services. The lighting is perfect. The camera work is perfect. The sound is perfect. It's like it's what I would expect from a top-notch Hollywood production, and that's very true. When you have a church of 40,000 or 50,000 people, in the case of Lakewood, when you have 52,000 people attending on a Sunday morning, you got an awful lot of tithing going on and giving, and you can afford the very best. And so some of these churches really do have the very best technology and the very best audio-visual setup that they could possibly have. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that if you're in a small church like the church I pastor at, moderate to small, 150 people maybe, you don't have the kinds of money resources to produce that kind of service. And what happens then is that when we have a COVID-19, and these small churches are struggling to get their services online, the expectation is Lakewood over there in Texas has great online services. Why can't we have, why can't we do services that have that kind of quality? Well, because it takes a lot of money to produce that kind of service. So it makes it almost impossible for a small church to compete with an online presence. There was some discussion about the loss of community as being a potential problem for a large church. The bigger the church, the harder it is to connect. But I would tell you that even small churches can have a hard time connecting in the body. So, but that is a very real issue. Several of you mentioned these churches had multiple campuses. So they might be a church, a church with 15 or 20 different, it's almost like franchises. And certainly the largest churches in Kansas City do that too. They have various campuses of churches. In the old days, like 20 years ago, we didn't do campuses, we did church plants. So if I was a church and I had grown from 100 to 500 or 600, I would ask for a group of people to leave the church and go plant a new church. And of course, that's a biblical model that says that way then a new group of people meeting together then can decide their leadership, put together elders, put together a a church, a set of church bylaws. But in this case, the mother church sets up satellites, which means those satellites are all feeding the mother church. Now, I'm not fond of the satellite model. I don't think that's long-term. I don't think it's healthy for these congregations. I do like what happened at Fellowship Church, what used to be Fellowship Greenwood. They were a hive off of a church in Leawood, and after a couple of years, they were cut loose and became their own church. Now they planted some churches, or they actually have some satellites. They have a satellite now in Raymore. I'm guessing they're going to do the same thing. I haven't listened to Pastor Chris's message from this morning. Haven't had a chance, but I'll go back and watch that. But Pastor Chris Williams. But my guess is that he'll do the same thing. They'll set up some satellites and eventually let them set them to be their own churches. I think that's a great model for church growth, my opinion. Here's one of you had this. To sum up all the church similarities, they are all large, theater-like auditoriums, have multiple campuses, have technologically advanced as society has, have great light, sound, and background productions, are either Baptist or non-denominational, and have a pastor between the age of 40 and 65, excluding the one, Dr. Young, who's 84. These churches are located in heavily populated areas, have an online presence, and are very community-driven. Okay, so that pretty much says who the big guys are, the big guns. It is, you may like large churches, you may not like large churches. It doesn't matter. You may like Beethoven, you may not like Beethoven, but Beethoven has had an extraordinary impact on musicians that followed. So the one thing when I teach classes where we talk about Beethoven, I say that everybody who comes after Beethoven either wants to sound like Beethoven or they want to write something that's nothing like Beethoven. But that's the impact Beethoven has on music. So like him or not, Beethoven impacts music. Like it or not, these large mega churches are impacting the church. They are, there is a shift, a dramatic shift that's happening in the churches. You haven't lived through the way it used to be. You're young enough that you missed the way churches were 20 years ago and 30 years ago. But what's happened, and it started with Willow Creek out in Chicago. When the big church growth movement started, things changed. Essay question number 3. And I do want to say this. I would love to have you, as a matter of fact, I'm telling you, do this. Identify a couple mega churches in the area where you live, maybe in the summer, maybe when you go home for Christmas, or here in the Kansas City area. Church of the Resurrection is not only the largest church in Kansas City, it's one of the largest churches in the country. If you have not been to a Church of the Resurrection service, and I have, then you should go. Raytown First Baptist, 10 years ago, was the largest Southern Baptist church in the state of Missouri. If you haven't been to a church service at Raytown First Baptist, and I have, you should go. Graceway is a rapidly growing church, or was for a while. I'm not sure what's happened the last few years, but it has grown very rapidly. Fellowship Church has grown very rapidly. Journey Church, Abundant Life in Lee Summit. If you haven't been to these churches, attend them. You don't have to like them, or maybe you will like them. But the point is is attend a service or two and see what's going on at these churches, because it filters out into the rest of Christianity. So, essay question 3. How should the church respond to the dramatic shifts occurring in attendance and in church denomination? When you are a denominational church and you choose to not say what your denomination is in your name or the front page of your website, that says a lot about denominationalism in the United States. How should the church, and when I talk about the church, how should Christianity be responding to the dramatic shifts occurring in attendance and in church denominations? That's your essay question. I'm going to give you a few little things here as you write about this. There are two dynamics going on in the church at all times: truth and preference. Truth is about the gospel. It's truth. Preference is about things I like and things I don't like. We are heretics if we change the truth. We are fools if we do not change our preferences. If the church doesn't respond, the church has always had to respond to societal change. And this is a time of great societal change because of social media. Societal change, as it spills into the church, causes change. Churches are experiencing both preferential change and some churches are experiencing truth change. So, talk about what should be the church's response to the dramatic shifts occurring in attendance in church denominations. And if you have some practical insights, talk about those. And the reason for even doing this is, ladies and gentlemen, 20 years from now, you'll be leading the church. So now's the time to be thinking, how do I respond to what's going on in the church? I've talked about worship. I don't expect you to understand the damage that a focus on experiential worship has to the process of worship in a body. I can't expect you to understand that statement because you've grown up in a time when that's been the norm, experiential worship. But I'm telling you, experiential worship is an issue. Not worship that causes you to have an emotional response. I'm talking about worship that's built around the experience. Okay? And so, how should the church respond to the dramatic shifts occurring in attendance in church denominations? That is the question for your essay. Okay. Now we're going to shift gears. We're going to talk about perception. And we're going to take a break first for about, probably 11 minutes here. But we're going to talk about perception. What you think you are experiencing and what you think you know may not be reality. And we'll start that I've got 158, 159 on my computer, and we'll come back and pick this up at 2:10. So I'll see you in 11 minutes.
Thank you. They're probably close to being back.
Okay. Let's continue. I'm going to tell you a story about Larry Spitaleri. Larry Spitaleri is my wife's age. She knew Larry just as part of the Spitaleri family. So the Spitaleri family lived about 5 minutes over in the same area that she grew up in. So she's my age, or he's my age. My wife and I are less than 2 weeks apart in age, so that's pretty cool. But Larry's about our age, and this incident happened about 25 years ago. So Larry Spitaleri was famous, and I guess still is, for how dumb he is. So, trying to be charitable here, but Larry's dumb. Now, he's not like mentally retarded or has some syndrome or anything like that. He's just not very smart, and he doesn't think through things. So, and he was known for that, for not playing with a full deck. And so one day Larry decides that he's going to rob a bank in Las Cruces, New Mexico. And so Larry thought he had planned the perfect crime. He was going to drive up to the teller window, the drive-through window, and stick up the bank through the drive-through window. That way he could get away quickly. And so he drove up, and the teller at the window said, "Hi, can you go ahead and give me your ID?" And he did. He dropped it in the box, and she pulled it in. And he said, "This is a robbery. Give me all the money in your drawer." And she looked at him and said, "No." And so Larry drove away. Now, Larry drove away, and his ID was still with the bank teller, which made it very easy to identify him because they had his picture on his license. And when the police caught up with Larry about 3 hours later, and they knew Larry from other crimes that he had attempted to commit, none actually, I think, successfully. Larry was standing outside his car with a can of spray paint, painting the car with a can of spray paint to try to disguise it so people couldn't identify him. That's my Larry Spitaleri story. This is a true story. And when I heard it, and I read about it in the paper, and I heard it, I went, Larry. Yeah, Larry. That is perfectly consistent with Larry. There are all sorts of conversations and stories and news reports of dumb criminals who do things and the outcome and their crime is not successful, and the crime is not successful because they were just dumb about planning. That's my lead in to reality. Larry thought he had the perfect crime. He thought he was going to go get this cash, drive his car back, spray paint it, and nobody would be the wiser and would know that he had done it. In 1999, a couple of Cornell psychologists came up with a term called Dunning-Kruger effect. Do you know what the Dunning-Kruger effect is? Have you heard the term?
Can't say that out.
Okay. David Dunning and Justin Kruger were the psychologists that came up with this. And that's why it's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. It is a cognitive bias whereby people who are incompetent at something are unable to recognize their own incompetence. A cognitive bias whereby people who are incompetent at something are unable to recognize their own incompetence. That is to say, people are not only incompetent, but their incompetence at that task robs them of the mental ability to realize just how inept they are. Incompetent people tend to overestimate their own skill levels. I dated a girl once when I was a student in college, a vocal student, and she found out, we only went out on a couple dates, and she found out that I was a music major, and she said, I can sing, and then she proceeded to sing, and it was awful. She couldn't sing in tune, and she couldn't stay in the same key for a whole line of music. It was awful singing. And me being the nice guy I am, didn't say anything, but I remember at the time thinking, she has no idea how bad she is. Now, I know you all have seen this happen in other people. I know that you've all seen this kind of incompetence where somebody is truly not skilled at something, but they think they are, and they aren't, they don't have the wherewithal to realize how bad they truly are. It seems to run rampant in old church sopranos and choirs for some reason. That's where I've seen it. The current crop of flat earthers are a startling example of this in action. A group of people who truly believe the world is flat, and no matter what you show them, you can't convince them otherwise. Okay? Dunning-Kruger effect. We are all at risk of doing this. We are all at risk of thinking we're on top of a situation while the reality of it is actually crumbling underneath us. Now, I'm not saying that you're all suffering from Dunning-Kruger. I'm saying that once you understand what Dunning-Kruger is, and you give it a little thought, you'll realize that you've come across people who are actually suffering from it. One time, a guy came up to me when I was teaching at Avila University. I was a professor and artist in residence there at the time, and I had his daughter as a student. He found out I was a Christian, and he came up and said, hey, I want to share something with you, something that I've been researching on the internet. I want to share it with you because I'm writing a paper on it. I said, great, what is it? And he said, the problem with modern Christian music is that they've gotten rid of the bass line. And what he was talking about was in contemporary music, it's pitched high. They don't have people singing the bass, so it doesn't sound like gospel. So it'll be a couple gals in a tenor, and it's pitched higher. Okay. And so he said the problem with modern Christian music is there's no bass line. And he went on to say that proper Christian music needed a bass line. He was a fan of gospel, and he was saying the fact that the bass line has gone away has gotten rid of that gospel sound, and you got to have a bass line, otherwise you don't have proper Christian music. And he was trying to say that basically the church was in heresy for allowing this to happen. And I looked at him and I said, the choral bass line has only been in use for the last 400 years in Christianity. I said, before 1600, there wasn't anything like bass lines that you think of that we have now. And he looked at me like this, and he turned and walked away without saying anything. He just decided he didn't want to talk about it anymore. So I thought, okay, well, the last 2,000 years of Christianity is a period where for only 400 of those we've had anything that resembles a true baseline. And he was so convinced that he was right that I think he thought I was making it up. I don't know. It's hard to play. I never talked to him again. But he was definitely having an issue with Dunning-Kruger. The same thing happens with syncopation when somebody says, all you Music History 1 students, right? Syncopation, we've talked about that. In Music History 1, 1300, syncopation comes in with rhythm. And syncopation is very big in the church, in church music, in the into the 1200s, into the 1300s. And I've had people tell me that syncopation is something that came around with Elvis, and then it came into church music, and that's why it's so sinful now. That's why pop music is so sinful, is because of syncopation. And I have to break it to them that syncopation's been a part of church music since people started writing it down. So, okay, comments.
I have one. Been thinking
Here we go.
about because, okay, if someone comes up to me and they say something like that, every comment you were just saying, I was laughing at all of them.
Yeah.
But that's going to be a turnoff. They're not going to want to hear what I have to say.
Well, it's best not to laugh at them. I don't laugh. I try not to laugh at people when they tell me dumb things.
Right.
What I say is, I don't think you realize that bass lines are a relatively new invention in music. That's what I say.
So you're just trying to be really diligent at not laughing.
Right.
Okay.
There's a difference between Larry Spitaleri. Larry Spitaleri is dumb.
Yeah.
Okay, he's dumb. There's a difference between not being informed and being just stupid. Okay. So the baseline guy, it wasn't that he was stupid. It's that he didn't know better. Okay. So when you don't know better, Dunning-Kruger is the thing that makes you not even know that you don't know better. Okay.
Okay.
So just be gracious with people. Assume that people are sincere in what they're saying, and you be sincere in what you're saying. And look, you guys are trained musicians. You will be the people that the people in your church come to, and usually they'll have an agenda. They will come up to you, they will have an agenda, and they want you to take their side. They may have a great point. The drums are too loud, or they may not have a great point. Maybe the drums aren't too loud. I had a situation in the church where somebody was complaining that the drums were too loud, and they wanted more church organ. And I said, I don't think you realize that the church organ is louder than the drums. And they said, how can you say that? I can hear that the drums are louder. And I took out my decibel meter, and I said, we were in a service, and I said, listen, here's the drums, and then here's the church organ. And the church organ was another 7 or 8 decibels louder than the drums. And it was the last time that person said that the drums were too loud. They still talk to me. But after that, they thought, Tom is informed. He knows how loud the drums are, right? Okay, so we are the resource person for proper knowledge on music and worship. We should be in the church. And so you should be ready when somebody comes up with some strange idea about worship or music. You should be ready to respond to them in a way that informs them without belittling them. Okay, so when somebody comes up and says, you're doing a song and it's by this person, Okay. And then they go on to tell me some sin that that person has committed. And then I say, okay, so we shouldn't use the song because the person who wrote it either left his wife or had an affair or turned out to be gay or something like that. Okay. Now, I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, if we get rid of all of the music in the church that was written by people who've committed sin. Okay, now we're back to John Cage, 4 minutes and 33 seconds. Because there isn't any music that has been written by someone who's not sinned. Okay. But I usually start the conversation with, have you ever seen the Sistine Chapel? The ceiling of the Sistine Chapel? Yeah. Okay, it's the church, and it's the hand of God touching the hand of man, you know, the finger of God touching that thing, and there's God, and there's angels, and those little cute little cherubs on the Valentine's cards come from that painting. It was painted by Michelangelo back in, you know, the Italian, basically Renaissance, and beautiful painting. And I said, have you seen it? Usually they'll say, oh yeah, it's a beautiful painting. I said, do you think that is one of the great artifacts of the you know, middle Christian church? And they'll say, yeah. And then I'll say, did you know Michelangelo was gay? And that's pretty well stops them, because it's something that they don't think about. And now this is not an issue about gayness. It's an issue about, we have to be very careful about how we figure out what we're going to do and what we can't, and what causes us to say we're not going to use this piece of music. But usually informing someone that, now, I will say this, if I have a song that I do on Sunday mornings for worship, and I just did that song last week, and then this week the person who wrote that song, let's say Chris Tomlin, comes out as being gay, or that he murders somebody, or that he has an affair. If that happens, I probably won't do Chris Tomlin songs for a while, because it's on everybody's mind. Okay, so I understand that. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that it's our job as musicians to keep people on track of what's actually important. And sin is one of the horrible things that we deal with as human beings. Everybody, all of us. And so if we start tossing out music by sinful people, we're going to get rid of a lot of music. So just be ready to give an account, right? Just like the gospel. Okay, so Dunning-Kruger ultimately leads to something I call, I've taken Dunning-Kruger and taken it a step farther. I call it the smartest guy in the room syndrome. The smartest guy in the room syndrome works like this, and this is the application for you. Someone afflicted with smartest guy in the room syndrome will think he or she is smarter than everyone else in the room. And I call that a superiority complex as opposed to an inferiority complex. There are people with superiority complexes. They really believe they're the smartest people in the room. Okay? Now you may actually be the smartest person in the room. As I said earlier at the beginning of this class, and I said it on purpose, knowing that I'd be talking about this, I may be the smartest guy in the room. I probably am. But that doesn't mean I'm right. Being smart is not the same thing as being right. Being smart means that you have a bunch of knowledge. Being right is that you know how to apply a solution in a situation where a solution is needed. But if you're suffering from smartest guy in the room syndrome and you have a superiority complex, and somebody comes up and talks to you, then there's nothing that they can say that's going to break through your bias that you're the smartest guy in the room. And that leads to all sorts of problems, especially if you're in a position of leading a ministry, a business, or a family. If you're a husband and you think you're infallible, or you think you're the smartest guy in the room, I'm talking to the guys now, and your wife comes up and points something out to you, which is absolutely true, and you believe that you're smarter than your wife, you're going to make some dumb choices. And you may not end up being married for the rest of your life. So the problem with smartest guy in the room syndrome is that you can end up doing a lot of damage before people wise up that even though you're smart, you may not make good decisions. When you're leading other people, you have a responsibility to them to not let yourself fall into this trap. Here are the ways to combat Dunning-Kruger. Okay, Romans 12:3. Do not think more highly of yourself than you should. Now, when I say that, that's a two-part loaded statement. If you have a degree in music, and you've been through music theory, and you've been through music history, then you know some basic things that most people don't. You know, when you graduate from Calvary with your degree in music, you will know more than 98% of the people in the world know about music. That makes you basically an expert. But that doesn't mean that you know everything about application, and it doesn't mean you know everything about music. It just means that you know more than most other people. But that doesn't mean that somebody else may know more about you on a musical topic, some specific musical topic. I know a lot about music, a ton about music, but I don't play the organ as well as probably 3 or 4 of you in the room. I know a lot about music, but I can't play the piano better than probably half of you guys. I'm a lousy piano player, and you know that. I know a lot about music, but the other half of you that don't know how to play the piano play the guitar, and you can all play guitar better than I can too. So I don't know everything. I just know a lot. So know what you know, but don't think more highly of yourself than you should. The next thing is, and I'm going to give you a couple, there's several places in the Bible. Proverbs 11:14, Proverbs 15:22, Proverbs 24:6, all talk about get counsel, get input from multiple sources. You are a fool if you make a decision without make a major decision without getting multiple pieces of counsel. Now, getting that counsel is not all there is to it. Getting the counsel and heeding the counsel is what's important. I've come across people who say, well, I want your opinion, but I'm going to do whatever I want to. Those are usually not the best leaders, and they usually end up self-destructing. So get counsel from multiple sources and heed the counsel from multiple sources. Even if you're the smartest guy in the room. You may be the smartest guy in the room, but it doesn't make you right. Lastly, Jeremiah 17:9, the heart is deceitful and wicked. It is deceitful and wicked. Don't blame your lousy choices on God. Okay? Do you know what I'm saying? When I say don't blame your lousy choices on God? Right? The pastor who will say, well, you know, I'm on a mission from God. God's told me this. I worked in a church where there were a group of elders, and one of the elders said that he was an elder among elders, and that God was had impressed upon him things that he hadn't impressed upon the other elders. Now, the truth is that it was just this guy's own bias, and he was trying to blame God for it. And the guy self-destructed. His wife almost ended up in jail because he told her that we shouldn't pay taxes because that's not legal. And he told his wife not to pay the taxes on her business, and she almost went to jail for it. Nice guy. He actually is the guy that led me to Christ. But oh my, this is Dunning-Kruger. He thought he would not listen to anybody else. He believed that what he believed came from God. And you're saying, well, how do I know if it came from God? That's why you get input from multiple sources. That's one of the ways God works. Okay, the awful truth is this. Listen, the awful truth is that you may really be, it's the fourth time I've said it, the smartest person in the room because someone is. Right now, how many people are sitting in the room? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Are there 6 of you in the room? Hello?
Yep,
Yep.
there's 6.
Okay. You do realize that one of you is the smartest person in the room, right? One of you sitting there is the smartest person in the room. And one of you sitting there is the dumbest person in the room. Now, that spread is not really that great. The dumbest person and the smartest person are not that far apart. Okay? You understand that. But understand the smartest person in the room doesn't mean that that person's actually right. They may be dead wrong on a subject. Okay? Knowledge is not infallibility. Knowledge is not infallibility. Stay humble and continue to ask yourself, what if I'm wrong on this issue? All right, more in perception. If a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, does it make a sound? Yes or no?
Yes.
No, it doesn't.
Wrong.
What was the question? He's writing.
If a tree falls in the forest and no one is there to hear it, does it make a sound?
Yes.
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 No.
Yes.
What?
No, it doesn't make a sound.
It does.
Okay, I see what you're doing.
Doesn't make a sound. You need 3 things to make sound. 3 things have to happen to have sound. If I go up to space and I go out of the spaceship and I take my helmet off and I scream, is there sound?
There's no oxygen.
Why is there no sound?
Because you would be dying at that.
You'd be dead.
Hang in there, guys. Stay with me. If I go up to space and I scream in space, is there sound?
No, there's no oxygen. You
There's
can't
no air.
scream.
Correct. You have to have something to carry the sound wave. A sound wave is carried in the air. It's the air that's moving. Air molecules are what make sound waves. All right? You with me so far?
Yeah.
If I'm on the ground and I don't produce a sound, is there sound?
No.
No. Because you have to have a sound source. If you produce sound, then you can have sound, but you may not have sound. If I yell on the ground, I have the potential of having a sound. If I yell in space, there is no sound because there's no air. There's a third thing that you need for sound. There's a third thing that must be there for sound, and that is an apparatus to receive the waves and turn it into audible sound. This is physics, just simple physics.
Please explain.
So sound works this way. I yell or I make a sound, it excites the air molecules. Those air molecules are vibrating. They hit your eardrum vibrate. The eardrum sends the signal to your brain, and the sensation is sound? Sound does not happen outside of your brain. So there's Catherine yawning. Hi, Catherine. And you can hear me, right? But it sounds like you hear me coming from the speakers in the front, but actually what's happening is the sound waves are hitting either side of your head at slightly different times, and the brain is interpreting those two different signals from your ear and has learned to create the sense of depth and dimension in where the sound is coming from. The actual sound occurs in your brain. You need three things for sound to occur. You need something that produces the sound waves, in this case, my voice. You need something that carries the sound waves, in this case, air, but it could be underwater. Water will carry sound waves to a certain extent. And you need a third thing. You need a receiver or a receptor for sound. Little bird ears are receptors. Human ears are receptors. Living beings are receptors. If a tree falls in the forest and there is nothing there to hear it, sound does not occur. The sound waves are there, but sound waves are not the same thing as sound.
Okay, that makes sense.
I would agree with that. I was waiting for like what if a deer hears it or a bird, but you said no.
And there's sound. If you have something to receive it, someone or something, if there's
Okay.
nothing there to hear it, there is no sound. There's some verses on reality, because perception and reality really are different. When we look at an object with our eyes and we see depth perception, the brain's taking two flat images, like a movie screen. It's taking two flat images, and it takes those two flat images that are slightly out of sync and turns that into the sense of depth. We don't really see three dimensions. The brain constructs that from two flat images. We don't really hear in stereo. The brain constructs that from two mono inputs into our head. That's a basic for sound production, actually. Okay? So here's the impact on perception. What impact does perception have on reality? What is real? The gospel is real. Here's some verses on reality, and we're not going to go through them because I got one more thing I want to go through here. 1 Corinthians 2:14, Hebrews 4:12, Romans 1:20, 1 Peter 2:9, Hebrews 11:1, Mark 9:23. I'll say them again. 1 Corinthians 2:14, Hebrews 4:12, Romans 1:20, 1 Peter 2:9, Hebrews 11:1, Mark 9:23. Those are verses on what's real, our perception of reality and what's real. Comments?
I wanted to make a quick comment about the whole tree in the forest thing. This may be a dumb question, but like if you're the one that's making the sound, nobody else is hearing it, and you also, you would technically be the one that also hears the sound as well. That means that there is sound.
Yeah, all three of those things. If I'm talking right now, I'm picking up sound in my ear. Part of the sound I pick up in my ears is bone induction. Just the fact that I'm making sound, that's going to go up into my ear.
Yeah.
Okay. That's why I say if a tree falls, not if I go out and yell. If a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, there's no sound. Okay. Okay. All I can see is Grace and Catherine. So my perception is no one else is in the room. I've got this very narrow, but I know there's 6 people there. So anyway, I guess I just keep, I'm sorry, I keep picking on Grace and Catherine. I don't need to do that. So, but yeah, you're doing a great job. Okay, Luke 2:52. Luke 2:52. And Jesus grew in wisdom and stature in the favor with God and man. Perception. I'm weird. There must be something wrong with me. Now, that's not me talking. That's like students that come into my office sometimes will say, I'm just not like other people, or they'll say, I'm weird. Or, and you maybe you haven't said that to somebody, but have you ever been sitting there thinking, I'm not like this person, I'm not like that person, I wish I were more outgoing, I wish I were smarter, I wish I were funnier, I wish I were this and that, right? Have any of you ever done that? Okay, good. Two of you have, Catherine and Grace. I'm assuming other people are shaking their heads yes too. Is it personality differences? Are we just broken? Maybe we're not right as human beings. Maybe it's immaturity. We chalk it up to all sorts of things. I'm going to tell you another story because my experience, I've lived life in a way that experience has taught me a lot. And I try to pay attention to things because it keeps me, I hate to make mistakes. I hate to make mistakes. But I abhor making the same mistake twice. That I don't want to do. I don't want to do mistakes in the first place. So I worked for Merrill Lynch for 15 years. And Merrill Lynch had, like every other organization I've ever worked with, Merrill Lynch had meetings. And some of the meetings were good. Most of the meetings were boring. So what happens after a while is you start looking at meetings as being just unnecessary. But sometimes Merrill Lynch would fly me someplace and would go have a meeting. And I'm going to tell you about a meeting that happened in Phoenix. Merrill Lynch flew 250 brokers, stockbrokers, to a meeting in Phoenix. And at that meeting, they presented all sorts of information and they had a guest speaker. The guest speaker's name was Jennifer Monroe. And I went to the meeting thinking, yeah, another meeting. But then Jennifer Monroe got my attention, and here's the story. Before the meeting, this is about a week out, I got a questionnaire. And on that questionnaire was a series of phrases, and it asked me to say what phrase was most like me. Are you more like this? Are you more like that? Do you think this way? Do you think that way? It's just a personality profile. I think you've all done it, right? The big one right now on campus seems to be Enneagrams, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. This is an Enneagram. This is something different. But so I filled it out. Now, as a Christian, I had already read some stuff by Tim LaHaye, and I'd already looked at the basic personality types. It wasn't Tim LaHaye that came up with choleric, sanguine, phlegmatic, and melancholic. That's been around for a long time. I think it was the Greeks that did that. So a couple thousand years ago. But there are personality profiles that talk about choleric, sanguine, phlegmatic, and melancholic. Choleric is a type A outgoing person. Sanguine, a take charge type of person, a leader, natural leader. Sanguine is the person that wants to be everybody's friend. A phlegmatic person is the guy who's laid back and just wants to let, doesn't take anything too seriously and doesn't get riled up about anything. They're just really laid back. And then the melancholy person is a person that has these kind of heart on the sleeve, emotional responses to everything. They're the deep feeling people, okay? Those are the 4 personality types. So I filled out this questionnaire and I sent it in and didn't think anything of it. I just thought, okay, I'm going to go to this thing. As a matter of fact, look at this. I still have, this was 28 years ago. I still have the paperwork. Isn't that something? This is the original paperwork I sent in 28 years ago. That's how profound this was for me. Here's my my response sheet. Not my response sheet, her analysis of my personality. Okay, so I fill it out, I send it in, I hop on a plane. We have a good time in Phoenix, and then we end up in this music. I'm there, or in this meeting. I'm there with my business partner, John. I've talked about John before. Oh, John, by the way, has a superiority complex. John is the smartest guy in the room. He thinks he is. And John's made some dumb mistakes because of that. So love the guy, but he's the Dunning-Kruger effect example I could have started with, but I didn't. Okay. So we have name tags on. We're sitting in the meeting, and it starts out this way. Jennifer Monroe says, there's 250 people in the room. She says, everybody with a blue dot on your name tag, stand up. And about 130 people in the room stood up. Over half the room. Then she said, everybody with a blue dot on your name tag, stand up. No, red dot. Did I do blue dot first? Okay, it's red dot and then blue dot. Let's say red dot and blue dot. And then everybody with the blue dot stands up. That was about 100 people. So maybe 130 red dots, 100 blue dots. Then she said, everybody with the yellow dot stand up. And that was about 25, 30, 20 people maybe. And they said, everybody with a green dot stand up. Well, I've got a green dot on my name tag. I have a green dot on my name tag, and I stand up, and I think nothing of it until I look around the room, and there's 11 of us. And I sit back down. Then she says, she launches into the personality type. And she said, these are red dots. If you're a red dot, this is how you look at the world. This is how you're going to deal with your clients. And these are the kinds of clients you should be dealing with. If you're a blue dot, this is how you look at the world. This is how you're wired, hardwired, and these are the clients you should be dealing with. If you are a yellow dot, if you are a green dot, she goes through all of that. And when she got done, and this is what's crazy, okay? She said, so I'm a green dot. And the green dot, see if I can find it here. All right. So it says the oh, here's the choleric. The choleric was the yellow dot. And it said, who should the choleric be? Who should the choleric have? This is a person that's decisive, a decision maker, task oriented, establishes deadlines, they're judgmental, they're leader types. It said, who should they be dealing with? They should get clients from entrepreneurs, troubleshooters, company presidents, managers, producers, dictators, and criminals. That's the people who choleric work. Then it said, okay, sanguine. Sanguines are the persuaders. Sanguines should be looking for management, sales, social workers, actors, teachers, public relations, and counselors. Those are the people that are at that level. Then the phlegmatics, which is 50% of the population is phlegmatic, and this is the part of the population I was part of. I'll come back to that in a second. And then the melancholies are the analyzers. Oh, no, wait, that was a melancholy. Phlegmatics, diplomats, scientists, engineers, dentists, professional athletes, and assembly line workers. I was melancholy. Okay. Melancholy, which makes sense. I'm a musician. Musicians tend to be melancholy. Okay, and it said the melancholy is an analyzer. And in a melancholy, this is me. The things that drive me: accuracy, preciseness, attention to detail, systematic, orderly, reserved, rigid, perfectionist, analytical, dependable, self-sacrificing, genius prone. Yeah. Loyal. We all think we're geniuses. Faithful friend, careful, meticulous. Okay. So those are the traits of a melancholy. Here are the people she said I should be working with as far as professions: artists, musicians, educators, researchers, and religion. I've had those jobs. I've had all those jobs because those are the jobs I'm drawn to. I go through this training and it's incredible. And I think this is really cool. It's very accurate. And I think it's so cool. I want to take my wife through the process. So the first thing I do is I get back to the office on Monday after flying back from Phoenix, and I call Jennifer Monroe. She actually answers the phone. And I said, "Hi, Jennifer. My name is Tom Stolberg, and I was in your seminar this weekend. And, I'm one of the brokers with Merrill Lynch. And I said, I really appreciated what you had to share, so much so that I would like to do this analysis for my wife." And the next things that came out of her mouth changed my life forever. I was already a Christian, so my life had already changed forever. But this was a biggie. She asked this question. She said, "Are you a red dot or a blue dot?" Now, the red dots and the blue dots made up 90% of the people in the room, but they don't make up 90% of the population. The red dots and the blue dots, people who go into the brokerage business are a very small part of they're in the smallest parts. Like choleric is only 10 or 11% of the population, but a ton of those cholerics end up being stockbrokers. So she said, "Are you a red dot? Are you basically a sanguine? Are you a choleric or a sanguine? Are you a red dot or a blue dot?" My partner was a blue dot. He's very sanguine, very into people. And I said, "Jennifer, I'm not either of those. I'm a green dot." And she said, "How can you stand your work? Don't you feel like you're prostituting yourself for your company?" And I said, "Yes, doesn't everyone?" And she said, "No." She said, "The blue dots and the red dots think they're saving humanity." And I said, "Huh?" And she said, "Tom, don't you understand? The way they're wired, what they think they're doing is making a difference in helping people." And she said, "You're making a difference and you're helping people, but your personality is not going to let you think that. Your personality is a personality that will tell you that you're prostituting yourself for the business." She said, "You're in the wrong business." At this point, when I share this, I choke up My eyes water up. And it's because all of a sudden I realized it changed my perception of who I was in the industry and what the industry was all about. And I realized that what I was doing had good attached to it. But I also realized that I would never appreciate the good that I was doing for people. And I better get out of Dodge while I could keep my brain intact. I share this with you. I can't be much more open with you guys than this class. I share this with you because it was where I stopped and said, I need to be doing something that reflects how God has hardwired me. I'm not broken. There's nothing wrong with me. As a matter of fact, my personality type, 50% of the population has my personality type. But I was just in the wrong job. You know how I feel about my job right now? I feel like I'm contributing to the kingdom of God. I feel that God has me working in an area where I can actually make a difference and help people along the path of their Christian walk, their faith. I can't wait. This is one of my favorite. I love what I'm doing. Now I make 1/10 of what I was making as a stockbroker. I make 1/10 of what I was making. I used to pay more in taxes than I make in a year now. And I wouldn't trade it for anything because I'm working in an area that God hardwired me to work in. It says he'll give us the desires of our hearts. Now, at this point, we're talking about perception. At this point, what I want you to do is, we've talked about choleric, sanguine, melancholy, and phlegmatic. Oh, this is Hippocrates is the one who came up with it. Yeah, 409 BC is where all this came from. Here are the basic temperaments. Write them down. Choleric, sanguine, phlegmatic, melancholic. A choleric has a drive to control, dominance, or decisiveness. That's the main attributes of a choleric. A sanguine, outgoing, sociable, interested in people, influencing and persuasive. That's my son, Josh. Josh is a textbook sanguine. Phlegmatic, steadiness, stability, patience, rate of motion. Phlegmatic would be somebody like, choleric is somebody like Teresa. Teresa Purinton that used to work for me. She's textbook choleric. Josh is sanguine. Phlegmatic would be somebody like Gary Rogers, just very steady, gets the job done, unflappable, phlegmatic. A melancholy is a conventional or compliance to structure, tradition, or rules. That's me. That's a melancholy. Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to take out a sheet of paper. If you're not in the class, you don't have to do this. I want you to take out a sheet of paper and I want you to write down the following things. You're going to write down in a column. Write down in a column. Mariah, Logan, Francine, Josh, Catherine, Grace. Mariah, Logan, Francine, John, Josh, Catherine, and Grace. Okay, you got all those names written down?
Yes.
Now your name is on that list if you're in the room. I want you next to your name to write down what personality type you think you are. A choleric, a sanguine, a phlegmatic, and a melancholic. Have it all written down? Okay, you can just put a letter, a C, S, a P, or an M. Okay, you have it written down. Now, I want you to go back and write down what you think other people in the room are. So Grace is sitting there. Grace, you're going to look over at Mariah and you're going to say, I'd say Mariah is a this. And then you're going to look at Logan and Logan is this. And you're going to write down the personality types of everybody else in the room. Okay, how are we doing? How are you guys doing? Don't spend too much time with this. Just jot it down. Is everybody done?
No.
I'll give you another 2 minutes. Do your best quick guess off the top of your brain. Okay, you all done? Okay, we're going to start. I got by the names that I have, huh?
What was the question? Say again?
I want you to turn them all into Logan. All the sheets.
I'm gonna email you.
You're gonna email me?
I'll just
You don't have to put your names on it. You don't have to put your names on it. Just turn it all into Logan. Okay. All turned in?
I'll tell you. Ish.
You're gonna send it?
Hold up.
I'm going to talk fast here.
Okay.
Okay, Logan,
Yes.
you have all those sheets in front of you. Mariah, what personality type are you?
Melancholic.
Melancholy. Logan, read all the Mariah answers.
I've got melancholy, cleric, and what does P stand for again?
Phlegmatic.
Phlegmatic.
Attic.
And I've got an email, 2 more. Melancholic and melancholic.
Okay, so majority said melancholy, one said phlegmatic, one said choleric. All right, go on. Logan, what do you think you are?
I think that I am phlegmatic.
Okay, and read what other people say.
What is CH?
Choleric.
Right?
Choleric.
Melancholic and what do these two say?
And what?
Sanguine.
Okay.
Sanguine? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So nobody sees you the way you see you.
Nope.
Okay, let's keep going. Francine, what are you?
So I said I'm melancholic.
Melancholy, and I understand people can be a mix of things. So you're saying you're melancholy.
Yeah.
Okay, how do people see Francine? Go ahead, Logan.
Phlegmatic, sanguine, melancholic, and melancholic.
Okay. Josh, how do you see yourself?
Sanguine?
Sanguine. How do other people see Josh?
What is CH?
Choleric.
Choleric. Sanguine. Phlegmatic. I should not be doing this. Okay.
All right. Catherine, how do you see yourself?
Sanguine.
Sanguine. And Logan.
I got sanguine, phlegmatic, choleric, sanguine.
Okay. Grace, how do you see yourself?
Choleric.
Choleric.
Melancholic, phlegmatic, phlegmatic, and choleric.
Okay. Now this is what's interesting to me, several things. First of all, some of you see yourselves the way that others see you. Some of you see yourselves completely differently in how you come across to other people. Okay. Now here is a very cool chart. It is, how do others see you through their frame of reference? If you are a choleric, you see other cholerics as being compatible. Okay? You're going to see a sanguine as a wheeler dealer and ruthless. You're going to see a phlegmatic as dangerous. And you're going to see an analyzer. You're going to see the melancholy as careless and bossy. If you are sanguine, and here's the point: if you're sanguine, you're fine with other sanguines, but when you look at cholerics, you view them as being prima donnas, and you view phlegmatics as being overreactive and manipulative, and you view melancholies as being immature and childish. When you're phlegmatic, you see cholerics as being nuts. You think they're broken. You see the sanguines as being super brains and fascinating, and you see the melancholies as disorganized and undisciplined. If you're a melancholy, you see a choleric as being old ladyish and overcautious. I'm sorry, the choleric sees you as being old ladyish, overcautious. The sanguine sees you as rigid and impersonal, and I mean, you get the point, right? Different personality types view other personality types in different ways. So we've talked about perception this whole class, and the point I'm trying to make is this: bottom line, you aren't broken. You're just different. And so what you want to do is figure out how God has hardwired you and serve him in that capacity. Now, if you are a true choleric, most folks are going to find you bossy or condescending or demanding. And so if you know that, and then you're going to go work with the sanguine or melancholy, you want to adjust how you're dealing with that person to help temper how they're seeing you so that they don't see you as overbearing bearing or to see you as nuts. Okay, so we could go into a lot more of this. Back when the class had more time, we spent like a whole couple hours on tearing this stuff down to its core and figuring out how to really deal with people. We don't have time to do that now, but the point is that perception and reality are not necessarily the same things. How you appear to other people is something you need to be aware of, and it's something you need to use in terms of ministry. If I know I'm hardwired a certain way as a melancholy, and I know that a choleric is going to look at me as being a pushover, then I need to make sure I'm not a pushover to hold my own with that choleric. If the phlegmatic thinks I'm moody, then I need to make sure that I deal with the phlegmatic on a very steady basis. There's a person I work with in ministry that is basically we serve almost at the same level in terms of authority. And he's very phlegmatic. I'm melancholy. I make sure whenever I'm talking to him as he's a phlegmatic, so that I know he can learn to trust me and understand where I'm coming from without him thinking I'm moody. Okay, does that all make sense? That's it. 3:15. One of my favorite classes.
Thank you.
We're done.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. If you have questions, I'll hang out here for a little bit. But I know you guys probably need to go. But if anybody has some questions, we're done.